I grew up confused about my culture and identity and felt out of place most of the time until I found comedy, which forced me to be honest with myself, and I realized mostly I'm just an expat brat. Welcome to my show. I'm Salman Qureshi.
Hey, welcome back to another episode with me, Salman Qureshi. What's going on? A lot is going on in the world, right? We're all glued to our televisions or social media platforms, whichever one you use to keep up to date with everything bad happening in the world, because who looks at it for good stuff? It's 5-6 days to the elections, and who knows what's going to happen, right? You know, this whole US election, for everybody outside who lives in the rest of the world that is not the United States, I kind of just find it so weird. I don't even want to talk about this because we don't live there. And yet we know everything that's going on with these elections. We know the candidates, we know the parties, we know their election system. And it baffles me how, I for the longest of time, I didn't even know anything around the politics of any other country, but the United States I did. And it's crazy. It doesn't matter who wins. Their international policies, foreign policies and stuff, it's going to remain the same, right? We've come to terms with it. I remember when I was growing up, it was the Bill Clinton elections. I was at that right age. We were, CNN had just come into our lives, and so I was hooked onto this story of Clinton versus Bush, and I was, it was like this rejoicing of like, hey, Clinton won. And I don't know why I was even siding with Clinton. It was just, he won. Yay, great. He seems to be the nicer guy. And then he continued bombing our part of the world, possibly more than George Bush did. If I know the stats right, I'm talking about George Bush Sr. The same thing happened with Obama. And it's crazy, that whole part that, but at the same time, it's you can't face away. You can't turn your face away from it, because it will affect some things. And you just go, if Trump comes in, it's going to be a lot worse. It will be a lot worse. I know some people have given up and go, well, they with the Palestine thing and everything, their hypocrisy is exposed. But I just think it is, unfortunately, as much as I hate to say, it's a little bit about lesser of the two evils. Although sometimes I know you can be feeling like, hey, it's who knows who the lesser evil is between the two. But in this case, it is. I mean, I just sit there and think, last election, 60 million people, 60 million Americans decided Trump was a good choice. And that stuff scares me, man. That, these guys are still supposedly the biggest power in the world. Anyway, it's a circus though, isn't it? With Kamala Harris and Trump and the whole thing. They've turned into circus. He's crazy. He does these things. He did the McDonald's thing. He's got these celebrities who are weird as, like Hulk Hogan, like washed out guys. Buzz Aldrin, literally today, Buzz Aldrin, the guy who walked in the moon, decided, you know what? I'm going to go from zero gravity to zero accountability on this earth. Like, it's one step forward for mankind and a whole leap backwards. I've decided to go that way. So it's crazy what's going around him. The whole comic story, that Kill Tony guy, you just get entertained, so you get hooked on. And I just hate to think that behind this is some mad psychological genius stuff happening, where we're talking about him, and because we're talking about him, we're okay to vote for him, and it doesn't matter. We're kind of blinded to, well, it doesn't matter which one of these two crazies win. But I think it would. I know things are bad here, but I think they can get worse with him in power. It's not going to solve the problem. And anyway, look, I didn't even want to talk about it. In 5 minutes into my episode, I'm still talking about the elections, the US elections, and the fact that at this point, we're still discussing the idea that orange dweeb might actually win. What sets me apart about, not sets me apart, but what one of the stories that really did catch on, came out a few days ago, was it was a marketing guy at NBC who was basically instrumental in setting up The Apprentice, right? And making Trump what he is today. And him coming out and writing this letter of apology, finally apologized and said, look, he wasn't successful. His boardroom was so terrible. We couldn't even shoot in there. We had to set up a fake studio. He was the only CEO who was, had time. Real CEOs didn't have time. They were busy running a business. And they certainly didn't want to hire someone from a TV game into their executive team. But Trump was like, let's do it. And so they had to paint him as being super successful. But they did it so well that now, he's good at sprouting those lies and repeating them, that people actually believe that Trump, the guy who went bankrupt like, I don't know, a gazillion times, was actually a successful business person. And it's incredible what marketing can do to people. So dangerous, right? Anyway, on that note, come down to the greatest stand-up comedy show. I'm performing tonight, tomorrow, and on Saturday. So it's the #1 show in the world, and it's the greatest show that has ever happened. It's the funniest show. I'm the top comic in the world. I'm just trying to see if this works for me as well. All right, I'm just gonna go all Trump on my marketing, and in subsequent episodes, I'm gonna give you feedback. You'll be privy to the fact that I'm doing this, and let's see if the larger masses, in spite of me openly admitting it, still fall for it. Okay, that'll be key. That'll be an awesome story, an awesome experiment that I'm getting on now. So welcome to the world's top #1 most listened to podcast. Shit, I gotta stop laughing when I do this. I had one of the listeners on YouTube left a comment saying, "Hey, I like your podcast, but sometimes you laugh too much." And now I'm laughing again. I end up laughing in conversation. I am a laugher, and I don't do it deliberately. He was like, it was almost like you wanted to use it as a full stop. It made me think that it's part of my communication skills, that it's a bad habit maybe, but I like to laugh. So, but it was a good note, and he was what shocked me most about that comment by that person was it was very respectfully written, and it was very constructive feedback. So I was taken aback. I expected someone to leave a mean message and go, "Stop laughing, you idiot." But it was actually very helpful, and I took it on board, and I was like, shit, yeah, I will keep an eye on that. Yeah. Anyway, stuff that's been happening with me other than the elections, because the elections aren't happening to me. I have no say in it. My eldest brother lives in Dallas. I hope he votes Democrat. But he's in Dallas, so I'm scared that the people around him are going to convince him. Last time I went, a lot of his friends had moved to Texas like back in the 90s. So I think they've had enough time to start blurring the lines between Republicans and problems. And so I never asked, but I had this sinking feeling that some of them are happy going conservative, Republican, crazy Trump thing. And I just hope my brother does not fall into that bandwagon. I'll ask him after the elections, because if I ask him now, I'll just get heated up. And again, I have no say in it. I think he'll do the right thing, though. I have faith in my brother that he won't. He's a smart guy. But that's not the criteria for falling for conspiracy theories, I think, anymore. Oh my God. I can't believe I'm saying this out loud. Okay. Other stuff the good stuff that's going on, guys. Every Halloween, we put on this show called Horrible Bosses, and it's one of my favorite improv. It's improvised, and we take the name from the famous movie, but the concept is awesome. So one of my fellow cast members, fellow performers, she runs the Courtyard Playhouse Theater. She manages it. Marie, young, talented. Stupid idiot, because why are they young and talented? But she's great. So she came up with this. And the whole show is really cool, because what we do is, part of it is just fun and games, but the second act, it's about bringing on audience members and getting them to share the story around the worst boss they've had. And then what happens is, as a cathartic concept, we get the audience to we reenact some scenes, we explore the life and what it looks like, and then we murder and kill the horrible boss. So, and they get a Polaroid photo to take home as a souvenir, and having expelled the ghost of their horrible boss experience. And when we did it first time, I thought it might not go down well, but audiences love it. And there's like, when it gets down to the whole killing part, we've got like fake blood, stage fighting, the whole theatrics, right? We really, and we sometimes go humorous and campy, but we actually strive to make it dark and violent as well at the same time. So I think, I love, as much as I'm used to people like laughing in the audience and the sound that I love most, it's also really cool to hear them gasp and go, oh, and shriek in surprise that we went that far. And we just become inventive in how the person is being killed. And I can just see the audience member who shared the story particularly really just being happy about the whole thing, because some of the stories are horrible. It's such a human story for everybody, isn't it? Every single person at some point has had a boss who's been terrible at some level of degree of terribleness, right? I've never been lucky to have like an outright maniac, like some of the stories I hear in this show, but I've had some bad ones. And so, it's everybody does, and it's just exploring it. And sometimes people come on. Here's what I love about it. A lot of the audience members come on and they try and they start sharing the story. And I think they don't realize how inappropriate and terrible the whole thing was. The person's behavior was, the boss, until they're saying it out loud. And the audience, and even me, if I'm interviewing them or I'm listening in as a cast member, we're all sitting there going, what? And it's then that it probably hits home to them that this was just really, really not the right thing to do by by any stretch of imagination. So I really love listening to those stories. I love playing the show. It's so relatable. Like I said, everybody has these stories, and I think it's also very challenging as a cast member to not fall back onto just easy laughs, but really honor some real stories and stuff. I like the whole comedy side of it, and exploring those ideas as well, but to really dig into their feelings and stuff and explore that and get them to reveal it, it's so interesting. There's this part of it that, like, some of the stories were I'll tell you, just this night we've done a stretch. I'm missing the one that's happening tonight, but I did the first two, so we do like a run of 3 nights up running into the actual day of Halloween, and there was one person that shared a story, and she was talking about her boss making everyone sit facing the other way from them, and sometimes they'd come in and he'd have rearranged the whole office room so your desk was somewhere else and all that kind of stuff, which was starting to like dig into how crazy the person was. And he'd just hover over you and keep going, do it, to if he wanted you to finish something. And then the best part about it was he had a stick in the office, like a real stick. And she shared the story about a contractor messing up and showing up to the office, and the guy came in and they heard sounds, and apparently I think he got trash, and then he sent him out and said, don't turn back and look towards me as you walk out of the office. And I'm like, now this didn't happen in the UAE, it was outside. It was a story that happened in India. But it's just, I was like, that's so, that you can't make up this stuff, right? If you did, I'd be like, this is fiction. But there you go. That was one of the worst. I've heard a few over the last 3-4 years that we've been doing this show. But these recent ones, obviously my memory is shot, but these recent ones, some stood out. There was another one this guy shared last night, and he was talking about his boss had a table and chair so it was like a bullpen, right? Like everybody's sitting in an open office. immediately you're like worried about it because the guy wants to keep an eye on everybody. But he had his desk built higher than everyone, and it had these hydraulic things, so you could even raise it further up. And everybody else's was custom made to be smaller, to the point where their knees were like scraping against the table, and it was painful for them. And when they complained about it, he said, "No, you should be honored that we got these customized. You got customized furniture." And you're listening to this going, "Oh God, these people are real. They live amongst us." And that was the horrible part. He had some other crazy stuff going on. And then there was one where the guy basically, he would get, shout. He wanted everyone to cry by the end of each meeting. He wanted at least one person to cry, right? That one was completely like a tool, terrible. But one of my favorite ones was this girl shared a story, and she was working for this magazine, and the owner slash boss slash manager, she ran a magazine that was about women empowerment, but she did nothing for women. And she gave an example of like someone asking for a raise, and she turns and goes, "Why should I give you a raise?" Because the person was like, "Well, I need to travel around, and it's burning into my petrol, and I might need a car because you've asked me to go to different events that wasn't originally part of the job." And she goes, "Ask your dad for the money." Oh, women's liberation. So that was horrible. That was just the stories these guys shared. Like I said, they're horrible. And but it just makes the show really, really wonderful, I love it for that reason. Anyway, so that's Horrible Bosses. If you are in Dubai, you didn't catch it tonight, you'll have to wait a whole year. But I would mark it always a great show to watch, and bring people around along, and one of you will always have. You already shared these stories. Just do it in public and have fun with it, right? I've been on a slightly different note. I speaking of bosses and authoritative figures. This really interesting story for me is from my 8th grade. Right, I was in 8th grade at some point in my life when Clinton was still in power. I think that's how long ago this was. Anyway, I'm in the midst of all that going on. I had this English literature teacher. He was also our class teacher, English literature and class teacher. Yes, his name was Mr. Mark, British dude. And even before you got to his class that year, the reputation in the school and what other students passed on was of this big boogeyman that you did not mess with. No other teacher had this reputation. Kids would just like pass on the story of going, "You do not talk in this guy's class," right? And so any class that was going into his, going up into 8th grade was walking in fear. Just his strict reputation. He was like I said, he was British. He had like a short haircut, bit of a beard, blonde, ginger. He was more blonde. Very neatly dressed all the time. Tall, lanky dude. Not lanky, but tall, thin side, but still formidable. Not skinny, not lanky. He still had like presence, and he'd be dressed usually in a white shirt and cargo trousers. And so, just very serious demeanor. And we all just felt pressure around him all the time. One of his other reputations was that he was a tough marker of work, which being Mr. Mark, yeah, I know, I get it, right? So it was a very high bar in his class. And that also kept everyone on edge, because for a lot of the kids where marks were very important, Mark was an obstacle, especially for the nerds, or as they're called, smart kids now. They were all like, "Oh my God, this is going to ruin my score for the year," and blah, blah, blah. I was an average student. I didn't care as much about that. I just wanted to get through his class. But I was scared about like being in there. But the thing that happened for me was, here's the great part about it. All right. So when I look back at it, he did not do a single thing during the whole class, the whole year, that was scary in terms of like punishment. We had other teachers who would flip out, scream. There were some teachers from certain places that would actually use corporal punishment back then, or kick you out of class. There was all these other guys that had these things, but he was the most respected and feared. And yet, like I said, like throughout the year, never heard him say a single thing to anybody, right? Like never hit someone, never shout at someone. I don't even remember him really particularly raising his voice. He just had this like intense look and folded arms, like a gaze that, was just enough. It was enough. And so, but he also gave me one of my greatest memories in school, because there was a twist that happened. There was this assignment he gave us in class, and we had like a limited time to do it. And it was about writing a short story with a limited number of words as well. And I wrote this story. I just came up with it about this kid having like the ability to read minds. I'm telling you as best as I remember it. And he's doing this exam, and he decides he'll tap into the mind of the other, or the smart nerd kid, whatever, and look at the answers they have in their head, and just fill up his paper with that, right? It might not be the greatest story in the world now, but it was. I think the twist was really cool. It was like Night Shyamalan, what's his name, the Sixth Sense guy, back when he actually made good movies. And so he walks out, and he's really proud, and he runs in the kid, and he hears the smart kid discussing the answers with the other kids, and he's like, "That's not the answers he gave." So he's like, "What are you doing? What were you doing? You were discussing these things." And the smart kid goes, "Oh no, I had finished my test, so I was just revising another subject." And so the twist was he had taken the wrong answers from the guy's head, because he was thinking about something else. It was a cool story, I thought, and I enjoyed it, writing it, and I handed it in. And lo and behold, we're all like, every time he marked it and gave it back, there was like this strong sense of anticipation and fear amongst everybody, and nervous faces and paper shuffling as he's handing back the assignments, and everybody's just looking at it, mostly groaning because of the marks they got. And then I flipped mine open, and he had given me a 10 out of 10. And with a comment, I still remember, it's like ingrained in my head. He said, all he wrote was, like it, right? And that like it sounded like he loved it. And getting that much out of him was the greatest feeling. And the pride I felt in that moment, the shock, the surprise that went into pride, disbelief, like it was all there. And I was just looking at it going, and then one of my friends next to me noticed the score, and he's like, "You got a 10 out of 10? And then it spread through the class that Salman had somehow scored a 10 out of 10. And then I had all these smart kids in disbelief coming to me and like looking at it. He's like, "How'd you do it? What'd you do?" And they're looking through it, and they're like, "Oh," and then they fall silent and walk off. I think I had something that the other kids didn't have, a little bit of fun and creativity. So the nerds were usually like the guys who were like super serious. So I think that was the only reason I managed to get through it. But that score stuck with me for life. I had worked hard at it. It gave me pride. It made me want to work more. It gave me the idea that, oh, I'm not necessarily dumb. I have potential with certain things. And I've always enjoyed writing since then. I've never written anything as great as that. But to me, that memory is one of the greatest. It's I still remember him for not judging me or my work based on my history or the fact that I'd get in trouble sometimes, and just to have that moment where I had done the impossible. I think it was one of the first times in my life. Well, I'm sure a lot of stuff I did in my when you're younger, but in just forming your memory stronger. That was one of those major moments for me that has always stuck through. And I hope, and I think, that's the difference between good teachers and good managers and good bosses, people who can inspire you, versus those that destroy you. And yeah, so I think, this episode's been about that, folks. I hope you remember your good ones as well, and more. I wish you more moments where people encourage you rather than destroy you. All right, on that sappy note, I'm gonna hang up, and I'll catch you in the next episode. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for joining us on another adventure with the Expat Brat, proudly brought to you by Capper Productions. If you enjoyed the show, please help us keep the mic running by clicking the link in the description and dropping as little as $3 to support us. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss out on our latest episodes.